I saw individuals who testified that they tried through the mob to go after Fidel.
Gangsters don't kill heads of state. Now, Sam Giancana might have been willing to play along, hoping that, well, maybe if I act like I'm cooperating with the CIA, isn't this all the same thing? CIA, FBI, what's the difference? One hand washes the other. Maybe I'll just act like I'm going along, and maybe this will get the FBI off my back partially, which it didn't. So I think he was just pulling their chain to some extent.
Giancana certainly never felt badly about taking money from somebody to do something. That God knows the CIA would spread money around in any way they could.
Giancana allegedly took the money and agreed to go along with the operation insofar as offering contacts. Giancana also suggested to friends that getting Cuba back for the mob would give him a stronger standing in the national syndicate. So began one of the most bizarre chapters in the history of the CIA's involvement with organized crime. The CIA labs developed a poison pill that could be slipped into Castro's drink. But before the toxin could be used, the insider recruited to administer the drug was demoted. The next plan was to have the owner of Castro's favorite restaurant put poison in his soup. But Castro stopped eating at the restaurant. The ideas became even more preposterous. An exploding seashell to be placed close to the spot where Castro swam. A deadly fungus sprayed into the breathing apparatus of his diving equipment. The exploding cigar and the poison cigar. What was Giancana's reaction to all this?
Yeah, I'll bet you he got a good laugh out of some of those plots. Some of it was pretty far-fetched. That's not how organized crime families handle it when they want to take someone out. That's not how they do it.
Absurd as they were unsuccessful, the clandestine plots to kill Castro had serious repercussions at the highest levels of government. Either President John Kennedy had never informed his brother, or both brothers never informed J. Edgar Hoover that a top-level government agency had been colluding with the mob behind the FBI's back. Hoover first learnt about it from his Chicago field agents when they were snooping around the Armory Lounge one night and found a box of CIA surveillance devices. The FBI chief was outraged. The CIA was jeopardizing the surveillance operation of the FBI's biggest mob target. Attorney General Robert Kennedy told the CIA director that the agency was never to do business with organized crime before clearing it with him. Recent revelations have suggested that Robert Kennedy did know of the CIA operation, but bowed to his brother's obsession to get Castro after the failed Bay of Pigs operation. The plot to kill Castro only came to light in 1975 in the congressional hearings. Two people involved in the plot, ex-CIA agent Robert Mayhew and gangster Johnny Roselli, testified. A year later, Roselli was found dead in an oil can off the coast of Florida. Giancana was also subpoenaed to appear. But something happened before he could testify. In the spring of 1965, federal prosecutors and the FBI decided to make an all-out attempt to prosecute the Chicago outfit, with Sam Giancana as its most visible and powerful target.
During the intensive investigation against Sam Giancana, it was realized that he had too many layers between himself and the actual crimes. And what they did was, since they had no chance of gathering evidence directly to implicate Giancana, they decided they would give him immunity from prosecution and then put him in the grand jury and ask him the questions based on all of the investigations that had been conducted.
Well, I don't think the local FBI ever thought that Giancana was ever going to tell them anything, and certainly ever going to be held accountable for anything he ever did. But he was a stand-up guy in that respect. He was an old-world mobster.
He would not testify. They put him in jail for refusing to testify, and he spent approximately a year in jail.
Mr. Giancana, could you answer just a couple of questions? It's been said so many times that your associates are more dangerous than the federal government, sir. Is that true? How long are you willing to stay in jail, Mr. Giancana? Huh? Under what circumstances, sir, would you change your mind?
Languishing in jail, Giancana offered $100,000 to any lawyer who could think of a way to get him off. But the entire case was so novel that aside from a lengthy appeal to the US Supreme Court on the entire legality of the case, there was nothing Giancana could do but wait. Throughout that year, the FBI took a lot of criticism for its actions. For all the 7 years, the thousands of man-hours and the hundreds of thousands of taxpayers' dollars spent on FBI surveillance of the Chicago boss, they still had no substantial evidence that Giancana had violated any federal statutes. At the end of the year, a decision was made.
I think the sentiment of the public was, okay, after a year, if you got something on him, bring it out, because you're just holding him in there on this flimsy charge, so either do something with him or set him free.
On the 1st of June 1966, Giancana left jail a free man. But his role as the boss of bosses of the Chicago outfit was over.
When Sam Giancana finally gets out of jail, Accardo, as the chairman of the board, with Ricca's full backing, meets with him, and I think it was basically made clear to him that you can increase your life expectancy by getting out of here. That you're out as boss. We've had enough of you and your annex and all the attention you bring down on us that messes up everything.
And so he decided to cut his losses and go to Mexico, where he planned to set up an international gambling operation. He was still a member of organized crime, and it was on behalf of organized crime, but he planned to take a hefty cut.
He was not the emissary of the Chicago mob. He was not a partner with the Chicago mob in those, as seems to become clear later when he finally returned to Chicago.
In exile, Giancana set up gambling ships in the Caribbean as a solid source of income. But on the night of the 18th of July 1974, his new life fell apart when Mexican police confronted him.
He was just putting around in his house. He was literally grabbed and thrown out of Mexico.
They literally came one night and put him on a plane in his bathrobe and said, "You're out of here."
No one knows why Giancana was deported from Mexico, and he returned to Chicago unceremoniously, wearing old clothes given to him by the Mexican authorities and his bedroom slippers. He once more took up residence at his home in Oak Park and tried to re-establish his ties with the outfit. But organized crime was coming under increasingly heavy scrutiny in the mid-1970s.
Well, part of the reason that they weren't as powerful, the Chicago outfit and organized crime in general across the country, was the efforts of law enforcement. And it just got extremely difficult to operate. They were being watched, they were being indicted, they were being convicted.
With so many mobsters going to jail and so many rackets being shut down, the mob's power was ebbing away. So were its bank accounts. Rather than welcoming Giancana back, Tony Accardo put the squeeze on him.
I think there were some disagreements between Accardo and he about the things that Giancana had established, the gambling concessions that Giancana had established, and whether or not that should belong partly or wholly to the Chicago mob, as opposed to exclusively to Sam Giancana.
Giancana was also being sought to testify again in Washington.
He was given a subpoena at that point for an appearance before Congress concerning his knowledge and involvement in the plot to assist the CIA in the murder of Castro, which was going to be the subject of hearings.
At about 10:30 on the evening of the 19th of June 1975, an old friend visited Giancana in his basement kitchen. Sam cooked a snack of Italian sausages while they chatted. With his back to his visitor, Giancana tended to his cooking. The visitor pulled out a .22 caliber pistol, placed it on the back of his neck, and pulled the trigger. The killer then leant over the fallen man and put another bullet in his mouth, then stuck the gun under his chin and pulled the trigger 5 more times. No one was ever arrested for the crime, and his death remains a mystery. Why was he killed?
One argument is that he was refusing to share in what he'd established in Latin America and elsewhere while he was gone, and that Accardo had come to him and said, "This isn't yours, this is ours."
The other one is the CIA killed him. He could really make the government look like kind of like a bunch of schmucks, really.
Well, there was indications that Sam Giancana thought he should go back to be number one. And when Sam came back and started mouthing off that he was going to take over again, he signed his own death certificate. And it was their way of retiring you. There's no pensions in organized crime.
The other question is who killed him?
The usual suspect in this instance is a guy named Dominic Butch, is a nickname, Blasi, who was for years Giancana's closest confidant. He's known to have been there that night because his car was there, and the police saw him leave. The gun that actually killed Sam Giancana, a .22 with a silencer, was found in River Forest next to Oak Park, which would have been along the route that Butch Blasi probably would have taken home after leaving Giancana's house.
Sam Giancana was buried on the 22nd of June 1975, near the graves of his wife, mother, father and sister. None of his old gang showed up. Not the mobsters who'd shared in his heyday, not his mentor, Tony Accardo, nor his celebrity pals like Frank Sinatra or others in the Rat Pack. Only his immediate family and former girlfriend, Phyllis McGuire, attended. More than any other mobster, why does Sam Giancana continue to fascinate people nearly 3 decades after his violent death?
Basically, I think it's an outgrowth of the fact that he's rubbing shoulders with the famous, that he did know a lot of famous people, and he was indirectly connected to some of them, like the Kennedys, by sharing a mistress, Judith Campbell, with John F. Kennedy, that he knew the Rat Pack in Hollywood. He was in the public eye, and therefore, given the number of interesting events that occurred during that period, including elections, assassinations, suicides, things of that nature, and the American fascination with the mob.
My theory was always that Giancana wanted everybody to believe that he did all these things. That he got John F. Kennedy elected, that he got John F. Kennedy killed, that he killed Marilyn Monroe, that he dated Marilyn Monroe. I think he loved all of the speculation that he was all-powerful and could do all of these things. I think he basked in that.
Sam Giancana's ruthlessness, his violent temper and the fear he instilled gave him the power to enforce discipline and create an organization whose influence allegedly stretched to the White House. His enormous ego, his notions of invincibility, and his love for publicity all led to his downfall. Despite this, Sam Giancana attained his dream, becoming the most powerful crime boss in America in the 1950s and 60s. Never has